that is working in a better way than any country's fiat.
Yeah, financial inclusion is, I think, one of the most interesting promises that Bitcoin holds. Have you ever heard of a guy named Muhammad Yunus? Have you ever heard of him? He's like a Nobel Prize winner. He's from Bangladesh, and he invented this concept called microfinancing. And he's actually a economics professor, and he's got, he's written all these books and whatnot. And so he talks a lot about, financial inclusion. And in one of his stories, he explains how the banking system is essentially geared to not serve the people who need it most. Meaning, normally when you go into a bank and you start up, let's say, a bank account, there's a series of questions they ask you, like, what's your net worth? What assets do you have? What's your credit score? What's your salary? Blah, blah, blah. All these questions, right? But if somebody, let's say, is homeless or doesn't have a bank account or is very poor, um, or doesn't have a credit history or whatever, sometimes it can be very difficult for them to get onto the rails, like the financial rails, so that they can start a business and, let's say, accept money from the other side of the world for some service or product. And so that becomes a bottleneck. And there's a lot of reasons as to why the banking system and the current network has set up their systems for, like, to act this way, because, they want to reduce their risk, blah, blah, blah. Um, but the truth is it's not working, and just to give you another example on this note, even within India, they found that a lot of the banks that the banks are starting in rural areas are not profitable. So the government is saying to the banks, hey, you have to start, let's say, your locations all over India, because everybody needs banking. But the banks say, hey, we can't make money on when we started, let's say, in the middle of nowhere. So the banks are also like, we're not going to do something that's not profitable. So you're stuck. It's a catch-22, where obviously people need access to banking, but the model just doesn't allow it to happen in the way that maybe we need. And so Bitcoin, again, being a parallel system, something that has nothing to do with the traditional system, is new. It's interesting. It's different. Now, who can get a Bitcoin wallet? Anybody. You could be 5 years old. You could be like, you could have no credit, nothing. Anybody today can just start up a Bitcoin wallet. Either they can join Unocoin and start up a wallet, or they can, download blockchain.com or one of the Blue Wallet or one of these accounts, and they can just open up a Bitcoin wallet. And now, from that moment, that person, just because they have a smartphone, nothing else, they're able to accept funds from anywhere in the world. They're able to send money anywhere in the world, and they're now able to join kind of this global commerce, right? And internet as we know it, but not just join internet to watch YouTube videos, but to join the internet to commerce with one another. So to me, Bitcoin is at its like core, it's highly inclusive, and that's, I think, another reason as to why countries like El Salvador are saying, hey, we're going to make this our national currency. We're going to gravitate towards it. We're going to, launch volcano mining, Bitcoin mining systems, and we're going to, ensure that everybody has a wallet, et cetera, because it's doable, it's feasible. So again, I know there's a big push now for CBDCs and digital money and all of that. Bitcoin, I believe, represents a, like kind of an opposition almost to the current system, one that is, again, not inflationary, but instead deflationary, one that is not, prone to censorship, but it's censorship resistant, one that is inclusive and not, discriminative, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's like, it's open source, so anybody can review it and verify what we're saying, and it's not like hidden behind closed doors, and now I think the most exciting thing, it's being seen as that by every major company, person. Like I said, BlackRock, it kind of doesn't get bigger than that, right? Like pension funds and governments, even, they invest their money into the markets via BlackRocks of the world. And so, so anyway, so I think there's also, I don't want to paint it as like just a rosy picture, because there's obviously, threats that pose themselves, right, as entities like BlackRock get into the picture, what does that mean for Bitcoin? But again, when you understand Bitcoin and you get how there's only 21 million and you can't make any more, and no matter how many guns you have or how much money you have, you can't change those variables, then you start to go, okay, this is going to most likely just mean more demand for a fixed supply of goods. So this might 10x the price of Bitcoin, maybe not, but it sure feels like it's early days, yeah, but it feels like something is brewing. And obviously, people shouldn't put more money into Bitcoin than they can afford to lose. It's still, I would say, like it's only been around for what, 12, 13 years. So people should be highly cautious, and we're not financial advisors, so we're not giving you advice, but we're just talking about what's happening in the world. And I think people should be awake to these facts, and hopefully someone, some of our customers are listening out there, and Unocoin has been doing this for 10 years, right? We've been acting as the bridge. Even the Indian government uses Unocoin as like a counterparty to buy and sell Bitcoin, right? Banking is something that I know, other companies have a lot of challenges with, not something that Unocoin faces, right? So I think Unocoin's in a very positive position as this bull run comes to fruition.
Okay, Sunny. So here we have a few counter statements from Divyan Setu Ramalingam. He is asking, not asking, but actually making a statement here. He's saying people can open bank accounts with their phone just with SMS. They don't even need Wi Fi. That's real accessibility. Bitcoin transactions are also too expensive.
Okay, so maybe the second point first. So I think that's a valid point. Bitcoin transactions can be too expensive, and depending on, usage of the network, it can be, prohibitively expensive. So I think that's a very, very valid point. I'd say the counter to that is to look at solutions like Lightning, right? So Bitcoin Lightning is picking up steam. In fact, I think in the last year, it's picked up over 1,000% in growth, et cetera, et cetera. And Lightning is a layer 2 solution on top of Bitcoin that essentially makes Bitcoin transactions considerably cheaper, right? Almost to the point where it's almost free. Yeah. And to the first point around all you need is a phone to start. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is that all you need? So, for example, do you not need to provide, let's say, residential proof, to start a bank account in India? Maybe you don't. I don't know. Maybe there's been some new
Yeah, yeah,
developments.
you have to.
You have to, right? Yeah, and again, most banks that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong, but most banks that I'm aware of, they do ask you about, what your financial situation is, and if you want to, let's say, access credit or something like that, then you need to have, assets in place, right? But I do think that the Indian government is obviously making a lot of strides towards, banking the unbanked, because it's like one of the most important things you can do to help people. So, and again, we're definitely not against, like, I think UPI and a lot of the developments in India, it's kind of surprising to me. But when I, started visiting India more regularly, I started noticing that a lot of the payment rails in India are actually more advanced than the rest of the world. So India is, I mean, although there are a lot of unbanked people and there's a big opportunity for Bitcoin, it should also be noted, rightfully so, that India has taken huge strides towards addressing some of these challenges, and the government and the relationship between technology players in India and the government, they've been able to do some pretty remarkable things. For example, the Aadhaar, which is like an identity system that came out, what was it, 10 years ago or whatever, is another example of collaboration between tech and government, and they've done some interesting things. But did you hear about the hack on the Aadhaar system? Yeah, there was like recently supposedly a lot of people got their identity kind of released to bad guys, and so I guess the bigger point that I wanted to make is that centralized systems, right? Whether it be like centralized money systems like CBDCs, whether they're identity systems, they do tend to be more prone to hacking, right? So meaning like, yes, maybe there are efforts right now to bring some of these other alternative systems, right, to market, but we should also be wary of their limitations. Like I said, CBDCs are great. Yes, maybe they're cheap to send. But what is kind of the thinking behind CBDCs, right? And a lot of people in the Bitcoin crypto space are insinuating that CBDCs are another, you could say, matrix for control, right? Meaning, in China, for example, right? Have you heard of the CBDC network and the social credit system? So what they do is, if you say something, let's say something negative about a government or something, and they don't like it, they can cut you out from the CBDC network. So now you don't have access to your own money. In Canada, even, where you think, oh, advanced country, blah, 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 when the trucker movement happened last year, if you recall, there was a lady who gave $50 to the movement and had her bank account shut and wasn't able to buy food for her kids, and was just wiped out of the system because a group of people didn't like what she was saying. So where's freedom of speech if you have this like matrix of control? Again, maybe in China that works, but globally in places like India, Canada, US, I don't think most people would welcome such a system. And they might not even know what's actually happening. And they use words like CBDC, and people are like, oh, fine, whatever. Oh, digital money sounds good. But when you peel back kind of what's happening, there's need for concern. And again, I believe that Bitcoin is kind of the answer to a lot of these concerns. Yeah, but these are very good points that he brought up.
Absolutely. So, Devin, I hope that answers your counter statements. And if you have any more statements, we would love to hear from you, because absolutely, from your comments, seems like you have a good understanding of the technology as well. So, Sunny, now moving on to the blockchain part, because we have already discussed the utility of blockchain, Bitcoin, and everything. So with blockchain, Sunny, this is something that came alongside Bitcoin, and it is now having some sort of utility of its own. Now these major IT tech firms are also trying to utilize this technology. Where do you see blockchain's potential going in the coming years?
Yeah. So I mean, Bitcoin is Bitcoin works because of this thing called the blockchain, right? So there's the word blockchain originally came from Bitcoin, and then what people started saying is that, well, what's really interesting about Bitcoin is the blockchain, this ledger in the background, right? This immutable ledger, but not the money, right? Not the money aspect of Bitcoin, but the blockchain is super interesting. Now, I should warn people that that narrative has been floating around for quite some time, right? Like, I'm talking 5, 6 years. People have been saying that, and I've been very skeptical of that statement because, for me, I think if you divorce blockchain from Bitcoin, all of a sudden blockchain's not what you think it is, and Bitcoin isn't either. So they're kind of like, they go hand in hand. And so the areas that people have been saying, hey, there could be a lot of room for disruption. One is supply chain. I keep hearing, well, supply chain super complicated and Bitcoin could solve so many problems. People say voting. Well, there's definitely major worries about the voting systems, right, in the US and all over, where how secure are these systems, like how immutable are they, like is there something weird going on? That's another example, right? Social media, you could have this, you could have that. So I think there's a lot of potential for perhaps blockchain. The one area that I keep coming back to is obviously the disruption of money. And the reason I keep coming back to money is because money is like one half of every transaction on earth, meaning every time two people transact, half of it is money, the other half is your service or good. So if you can fix money, that's kind of like one of the biggest things you could ever fix, right? Whereas like supply chain's interesting, but why can't you do that on an AWS server? And to this day, I haven't been able to figure out why we can't do stuff like that just in the normal way that people build companies. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm interested in, so even CBDCs, right? They kind of claim that it's like a central bank digital currency, and there's like a blockchain, but it's a private blockchain, not a public blockchain. So I feel like the word blockchain does get diluted a bit. And again, if I had to, like, let's say, name one other blockchain system that has seen a lot of uptake, obviously the number two blockchain is Ethereum, right? So Ethereum is, and again, I've been very close to the Ethereum project, given that I'm from Toronto, and I've seen. I remember back in the day, Vitalik actually writing the Ethereum code, and I'm friends with some of the other co-founders of Ethereum, so I have a lot of respect for them. You know, Unocoin, we obviously trade, like people buy and sell Ethereum from us, and Ethereum took a slightly different twist. They said, hey, we think blockchain is super interesting. We think Bitcoin is interesting, but what if we could have a Swiss Army knife of a blockchain? What if we could have a blockchain where a programmer could quickly whip up an application like supply chain, voting, social media, Airbnb, whatever. You want to build something, you can build it on top of Ethereum. And so Ethereum really took that idea of the blockchain to the next level. And you could argue that most of the developments and kind of things that have happened are not so exciting, right? Because there's, everyone knows about crypto. There's a lot of bad things that happen. People just whip up a blockchain and whatever. But I think one of the areas that is exciting is DeFi, right? Like decentralized finance, right? So if you think about Satoshi's kind of initial goal with Bitcoin, it was to get rid of the middleman. But then you have all these centralized exchanges around the world that are like the middleman. So you got rid of the middleman, but then you have middlemen. So like Unocoin, right? We are a prime example of a middleman. And so the fact that I think Ethereum has given rise to this concept of decentralized exchanges, right? So something like Uniswap, or these different protocols that allow two people to interact without having a central party is, I think, very interesting. Now, just to bring it back again, because all roads lead to Bitcoin, I think what's happening on Bitcoin now is even more exciting, because if you see like the way Ethereum approached it and a lot of the way smart contracts are developed, there is a lot of attack surface area, I would still say, by regulators. Even AMM, like the whole concept of automated market making, etc. That there is a level of control that the central parties, even though they're decentralized financial protocols, there is a certain level of control that they can exercise. And regulators are saying, hey, if you can change the code, if you can take part in any way, then this is not something that's decentralized, and so we're going to come and regulate you. Yeah. So now again, Bitcoiners are looking at this, and they're now launching, TDEX is, I think, one of the examples where it's truly decentralized and there's literally no central party in the transaction of two parties. Yeah. So anyways, I don't want to get too off topic, but I think blockchain is interesting. But definitely, I think it's not to be mistaken or confused for what Bitcoin is actually trying to do, which is, again, become this like reserve currency of the internet or the world, really.
Absolutely, Sunny. And I feel like more than a reserve currency, it's being looked at as a store of value these days. I mean, if we talk about the transition that has happened in the past 10 years, now people look at it more as an asset class than as something they could use to transact in. So, what is your opinion on that? Like, do you believe in that utility in particular, or do you also believe that in coming days that could be it?
Well, I definitely think digital gold, like using it as a form of, again, hedging against inflation, just as a way of preserving your life force, right? Because like when you save money, it's essentially your life force in some ways. I think Bitcoin is superior. I think that is the main narrative that's brought it so far and will continue to drive it forward. Um, and I think the transactional element, like Divyan brought up as well, is that it's a bit of a tricky one, right? Because during times when Bitcoin becomes super popular, the fees can go up. And so although the transacting a Bitcoin is again super necessary and exciting, it's kind of trailed behind some of this like development around Lightning, et cetera, et cetera. So if I had to like number them in terms of what I think is the most important value proposition, I do think that digital gold and maintaining that censorship resistance, the 21 million, and everything that goes into that narrative, I feel like that is what the Bitcoin kind of programmers and the ethos really gravitate towards. But then But yeah, but then at the same time, like I said, if you can't like with what's the problem with gold is, let's say I have some gold in India and I want to send it to a business in New York. I can't do it. I have to take it out of the safe. I have to sell it at a gold store. I have to wire the transfer money over on Monday, and it'll take a week. And it's just very it's not very convenient. Whereas again, Bitcoin has the same properties as gold. It's going up in value over time, but I can also zap it across the world, albeit it might cost $5 or $10, or if I'm using the Bitcoin network and not Lightning. But at the same time, I have that freedom to transact. So I think that's probably like the number two, like kind of amazing thing about it. And then, you can keep going down from there.
Absolutely, Sunny. I think if we keep a count of it, we will forget the counting about the kind of things Bitcoin has to offer. But there was a recent report that I remember I read about from Glassnode that says that almost 80% of the Bitcoin wallets are already in profit now, even though the price is like 50% of its all-time high as of now. Because I think that was last week that report came in, and that time it was around
Mhm.
$35,000. So I'm wondering, the major association of Bitcoin's image is with a value, like the profit side of the things, as an investment and as something to trade
Mhm.
in, not more into the major utilities, which I feel like the original idea was by Satoshi Nakamoto. So what do you think about that? Like, do you feel like this is the right narrative to look at, or maybe it will take some time and that will be the right narrative that will come in front of the people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what Satoshi exactly thought because no one's ever met him, of course. But no, like I said, is I do feel like 'cause I follow the Bitcoin development and the teams and people like Dr. Adam Back and Blockstream and like the core developers, and I can't help but feel that, because I don't know if you remember, but there was this whole like tug of war with Bitcoin around SegWit, and it was about 5 years ago. They call it the blockchain wars or something like that. But there was a big kind of pull, and the whole idea was, and this is when Bitcoin Cash was born, right? So people like Roger Ver and them said what you're saying, which is that Bitcoin is created for transacting, for moving along, so it has to be very cheap to send, and that's why the block size needs to be increased, right? And there was a big war, a big battle, and it ended up in Roger Ver finally saying, I'm going to create my own fork from Bitcoin. And that's what he did, and he created that. He created a system that essentially is cheaper to transact, et cetera, et cetera. But then it kind of it kind of like let go of some of the principles that the original Bitcoin holds on to, which is that why do people say that the block sizes need to be limited to 1 megabyte or whatever it is? The reason is so that more people can run very simple devices like Raspberry Pis, etc., in their homes and actually decentralize the network. If you increase the block size, what ends up happening is Bitcoin ends up in server farms, and as soon as they're in these big server farms like Amazon, blah blah blah, now it's centralized again. So it's like a choke point, meaning governments or whoever bad guys can easily come to that central point and say, nope, we're not going to allow this anymore, shut it down, or we want to make some changes. But the people behind Bitcoin said, no, we have to maintain its decentralization, because it's decentralized, it's impervious, it's resistant to censorship, it's resistant to the number 21 million being changed, all these other factors, right? And so I felt like they really prioritized like the value of Bitcoin, the fact that Bitcoin was gearing up to be, a replacement to gold or the US dollar. And they said, look, the other thing about being able to send it cheaply is important, but we're not going to address that at the base layer. We're going to address that at the secondary layer of like Lightning or Liquid and some of these other solutions that are out there. Whereas Bitcoin Cash went the other way. But if you look today of the market cap between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, I don't think it's even comparable. And then you look at the other guy, Craig Wright, he also forked off Bitcoin Cash and created something called Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, with a similar type of vision, right? Again, trying to make it cheaper, faster, more transferable, more ready for business, and that has also collapsed in the face of the price of Bitcoin. So what to all I say all that to say that I do believe that Bitcoin is on the right path, and I can, I'm an engineer, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not obviously like an expert like the people who work on Bitcoin. They're way smarter than I'll ever be. But again, when they make these decisions and they explain why they're doing it the way they're doing, to me it really makes sense, and I can get behind it. But like I said, the beauty of Bitcoin is you don't have to get behind it. If you're like Roger and you believe something else, it's open source. Go build your own system and prove to the world that you're right, or wrong. Yeah.
Well, in the case of Bitcoin Cash, absolutely. When it came in, it was a big hype and, it was everywhere. But then I don't see much of a movement around Bitcoin Cash these days, maybe because it's yet to come to the public in that picture. So, another question, Sunny, like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, there have been a lot of folks around Bitcoin, because obviously people had a different belief, or maybe they assumed the original idea to be something else and then they went through with their own idea of Bitcoin. Do you feel like maybe something might just come up in this bull run, something new that might change the scenario and the narrative, and people might like it more? I mean, obviously,
They might like what? Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash?
the new Bitcoin. I mean, just I'm talking about an imaginary scenario. If there has to be a new Bitcoin, let's say a new Bitcoin has to come. What all qualities do you think it should have, which maybe
Uh,
Bitcoin lacks, in your opinion?
that's a good question. That's a good question. And I mean, first of all, no, I don't think so. Now, do I do I like, for example, if there's anything that I believe in more than Bitcoin, it's the free market, right? The free market, which is just humans coming together, innovating, creating, building new things. So, do I think it's possible? Yes, of course. And do I want it to happen? Oh, and so, do I want it to happen? Absolutely. But at the same time, I don't think that it's going to happen. It's like saying, Sunny, what do you think are the odds of a new internet emerging? Like, technically speaking, you could say, hey, HTML, TCP/IP, it's not, the best. There's something better. Someone invented something better. Here's a study that shows that this new internet is faster, or this new internet is better in some way. But there's no way our internet's going away, mainly for one reason, and one reason only. It's called network effects. Like, once something gets so ubiquitous and it's so highly used by so many people, that to now try and switch to something else, it's too difficult. So am I saying that there's nothing that can be better than Bitcoin or can surpass it? No, it's always possible, but I don't see it being likely. And especially being somebody who's seen Bitcoin from kind of 2011 all the way to today, and all the innovation that's happened in between, there's a few things that kind of got me a little bit excited, but nothing compared to like that initial excitement of like when I first discovered Bitcoin and compared it to the traditional financial system, right? And so any type of leap beyond Bitcoin would be, in my view, would have to be equally like impressive. Like the way Bitcoin went from the traditional financial system, it was like this 0 to 1 kind of leap. Well, I would be hoping for something like that to happen, in Bitcoin or crypto. Yeah. And I haven't seen it. I'm not expecting it to happen, but could it happen? Yeah. We don't know.
Absolutely. I think one of the most interesting factors about the whole market, about the whole industry, is unpredictability. You never know what's going to happen and when. Like this bull run, nobody had predicted that this would be, these kind of price actions would be visible so soon. Everybody was hoping for it starting March or maybe February and post halving. But the market has already started reacting. So let's see what do we have for the last month of the year. December is coming ahead, and usually, it's always the closing year. And obviously start looking at 2023, starting January 1st to now, we have done a great progress in terms of price reactions. So I think it's all about waiting and watching around what's happening. So great session, Sunny, today, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Divyan, for all your interesting statements and questions. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much, Sunny. It was really insightful, really interesting. We'll see you all again next week on our Twitter Spaces. So make sure to follow our Twitter account to stay tuned and get regular updates on these.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.